Well, good morning, everyone. It's really good to see you all. Good to see some familiar faces, many of whom I've known for years, and great to see the continued wonderful thing that God is doing here at Redeemer. I'm here this morning with my friend Bram. He and his wife Svi are a key part of our church here in Ipswich. Not here in Ipswich. So if you have a chance, go and say hello to him later on as well. It's an exciting day for us at Hope Church because we've got 5 people getting baptised this morning, which is really, really cool. And then in the evening, we're going to get together and watch England win the Euros. So it's going to be a great day in the life of the church. Wonderful. Well, I don't know about you, but I struggle to be in silence sometimes. Does anyone struggle with that? Yes, one honest person here. We struggle, don't we, with kind of just being on our own and in silence. There was an experiment done a few years ago where people were given the opportunity to either sit in silence for a prolonged period or to repeatedly give themselves electric shocks. And 2/3 of men in this study repeatedly gave themselves electric shocks rather than sit in silence. It was less so for the women, but there was still a lot of the women who would rather shock themselves with electric shocks than sit in silence. We struggle with that hugely, don't we? We struggle with this notion of being alone and actually spending unhurried time kind of in our thoughts or in prayer. And that is a big problem. That's a big problem for Christians, and that's, I guess, most of us here, because actually we are called to spend time in the quiet place, in the hidden place. And a big problem is we can't seem to stop. We can't just seem to stop and be quiet. We can't seem to stop and be still. We can't seem to stop, mostly because of these things. Because everywhere we go, we are connected to these things. I guess most people here are connected to one of these in some way, shape, or form. And every day, through these things, we are offered a feast. We are offered a feast of entertainment. We're offered new singles dropping from our favorite artist, or new YouTube videos that we might be desperate to see that might drop, or another podcast that we've been recommended to listen to, or another binge-worthy series on Netflix that someone said, if you like that, then you really have to watch this, because it's going to be so good. On Instagram, we are offered hundreds of images, and anytime we want more, we simply drag down and refresh, and we can see hundreds more images that are in some ways entertaining for us. And then there's breaking news updates. Who this morning spent more than half an hour reading about significant news happening across the pond? A bunch of us. And what might have just been one headline that we could have read, we thought, well, no, I want to hear all the analysis on this, actually. And every day we're offered news and distractions and a feast of entertainment. We're offered people getting a hold of us in different ways through Snapchat or WhatsApp, just constantly looking for something new, an age of distraction that we're in. We're offered a feast. We're offered media that's just competing for our attention. And we're led by the eye wherever we go. Come and look at this. Come and read this. Come and watch this. It's everywhere. And it's not really something new in some senses. You know, attention-grabbing entertainment has been around for millennia. But the pace at which it's thrown at us is new. And it is a big discipleship issue for us who are Christians here. And it has big implications for our lives because we cannot seem to go for 15 minutes without something that is trying to grab our attention. Something that's saying, come and see. It never stops. You know, people of old would have gone to the theatre to get entertainment every now and again. We now carry around with us a theatre at all times. Many of us here go to bed with a theatre, and we wake up to a theatre. It's happening all of the time. We have this constant flow of entertainment, a feast. And yet for Christians, there is another feast that we're called to. There is another feast that we are urged to come and eat at. There is a great reward that is offered us, but it's a reward that is behind closed doors. And I want to read to us from Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus is in his major sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, where he's does some of his most significant teaching. And this is what he says. We're just going to read 2 verses, verses 5 and 6. Jesus says this: "When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues, in the public worship places, and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. And then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. That's a significant thing. I want us just to have that in our minds today, because we are creatures that are motivated by reward. Everything we do it for a reward. Every time we go to our mobile devices to see a video or an image, we do it because there's something going on in our minds. We get something like a dopamine hit. We get hit with this kind of chemical rush that is in some ways rewarding. Or we might, in not such good instances, be aroused by some images we look at. Or where it's kind of going to stuff that may be scandalous in some ways, we might feel better about ourselves because we think, at least my life's not like that. So a politician who gets in trouble for saying something they shouldn't have said, or something that's gone on elsewhere, we kind of get a bit of a reward from that of like, well, I've not got in that kind of trouble, I'm at least better than them. There's reward everywhere we go. We don't do things other than for a reward. We get a sense of feeling wanted because people message us or people like our posts. It kind of makes us feel loved. It makes us feel just for that brief moment, but it doesn't satisfy. It doesn't actually give us the true sense of fullness that we're seeking after. But it gives us a little reward. And we see here that Jesus is saying, in the secret place, behind the closed door, there is a reward offered to you. There is a reward offered to you. And we've got to take these words really seriously. Because if Jesus is saying that there's a reward for you in the secret place, that's going to be a lot better than the rewards that we're hit with when we head to our phones every few minutes. It is going to be better. Jesus knows a thing or two about human beings. And he knows a thing or two about reward and what is good for us. And he's saying there's something better. Your Father who is in secret will reward you. And we need to, friends, we need to find the secret place. We have to find the secret place. We need to learn to shut the door. And many of us, we know how to physically do that. I did that physically this morning, but I took an open door in with me. I don't usually do that, but I kind of wanted to keep an eye on the time, but I also wanted to see what was going on with Donald Trump. But you see, Jesus says shut the door, but we're carrying around an open door with us all the time. Why does he say shut the door? So you don't get distracted. So no one can come in on you and interrupt your time with God. But we're carrying around an open door with us of someone who can get a hold of us at any moment, or something that can grab our attention at any moment and take us off of the thing that ultimately will reward us. We have to find the secret place. There's a call here from Jesus to center our gaze, our attention, our minds on God, not to focus on all the things that might be offered to us. Now, this message is not about technology today, but there will be implications for us because we are in an extraordinary time, and the constant scrolling is doing untold damage to our attention span. We can't seem to concentrate any longer. Not many people read books much anymore because they're just not exciting compared to YouTube Shorts. They're not exciting compared to Reels. They're just not grabbing the attention. And our attention spans are actually being affected. They're doing untold damage to our well-being. Listen, you need to understand, it's not like there's some like evil guy sitting in a conference room in New York somewhere thinking, how are we going to ruin everyone's lives with social media? They're not evil people necessarily. They just want to make money, which most people want to do. And so they're trying to design products and social media outlets and other things that will keep a hold of your attention, because your attention means clicks and your clicks means money. That's exactly what's going on. So it's not some kind of like Dr. Evil sitting in some kind of... They just want to make money. And your attention is a commodity. Like that is the economy now. It's not a part of the economy, it is the economy. If you give your attention to something and your clicks to something, it gets people very rich. And so this is your attention is fought for. Do you understand that? There's not anyone here who is exempt from that. Your attention is being fought for. There's a fight going on, a wrestle going on, so that you look at that rather than that. That's what's going on. There's always going to be something that grabs your attention. And big companies, these tech companies, they go to extremes. It has been someone's job at Google, it's well documented, to work out the exact color blue that they should have on their homepage, on their icon, to increase engagement. And so they tested 41 different shades of blue to work out which would be the most attention-grabbing and cause people to return to their website. That's astonishing, isn't it? That is absolutely nuts. This is what's going on. You can go and Google it for yourself if you want to. This is the lengths that tech companies are going to. And what's it all doing to us? Is it making us happier? Is it? It's not, is it? It's not. The whole premise that we're sold is that if you have more entertainment in your life, you'll be happier. But it's actually not making us happier. People are more isolated than ever before because they're stuck behind a screen rather than interacting with real human beings. People are more insecure than ever before, looking at images of perfectly curated men and women on screens and thinking, I don't look like they look. And often they've spent hours in a makeup studio or they've had their images altered in order to look perfect. And you think, I don't look like that. And so people are increasingly getting body image issues or gender confusion because they're just sucked into stuff that is completely unreal. Or we're getting the highlights reels of other people's lives rather than the kind of reality of people's lives. And we think, well, my life's rubbish in comparison to theirs. It's not making us happier. It's not making us more whole. And the whole outrage society we're living in is being fueled as well. People are more judgmental. People are more quick to cancel people. People are more quick to pass judgment on others. It's fueled this sense of anger, and it's kind of made us tired as well. Because you can go on your news feed now on your BBC app, and you can see more disturbing scenes in 10 minutes than someone who lived 100 years ago would have seen in their whole lifetime. And it's making us anxious, and it's making us desensitized to stuff as well. So we're like, I don't even really care anymore. It's making us more voyeuristic. I want to see all the gory details. It's not healthy. And we really need to kind of see this for what it is. Now, what is the answer to all of this? What am I suggesting today? Am I saying we should bury our heads in the sand, be ignorant of what's going on in the world? Am I saying we should take a hammer when we get home and smash up our phones? I don't know. Some of you, that may be the thing you've got to do. I don't know. But it's impossible to just break it by doing those things. There has to be something else that we're going to come on to today. But before we kind of dismiss smashing up our phones with the sledgehammer, let's just consider the words of Jesus, where he says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. There's something radical Jesus calls us to. Decisive action. I don't think he would be pleased with anyone cutting their hand off physically or plucking their eye out literally. But there's something decisive he calls us to. And you've heard Steph Liston preach here before, and I remember hearing Steph speak once, and he said that he was speaking to a friend, and his friend had been asked by someone else, if I become a Christian, does that mean I've got to stop wearing jeans? And do you know what his wise friend said? I don't know, maybe. Just think about that for a moment. Nothing wrong with wearing jeans. There's nothing in the Bible about wearing jeans. But if his friend is obsessed with what people think of him and the way he looks, if he's living to please others, if he's just wanting all the time to, wow people with his fashion, well, maybe actually that's an idol in his life. And maybe he's actually got to say, I'm not going to wear jeans. So the answer is, I don't know, maybe. Do you understand? This is the life we're called to. It's a radical life. And so there might be some decisive action that comes from today. But listen, if you take a sledgehammer to your device later on, there'll still be some hard work that needs to be addressed. Still a battle ahead for your attention. Still, there will be a battle to fix your eyes on Jesus as opposed to the entertainment offered us in the world. And when my wife Sarah and I were newly married, we were living in Southampton, and we actually moved in next door to another family from our church. And not long into our time living in this house, not long into our married life, I had a knock on the door from my next door neighbor, and he was carrying his Xbox with him. And he said, "Tom, I need to give you my Xbox because it's ruining my marriage." I thought, "Oh, thanks, you're giving it to me now." He had to take some decisive action because he realized he was just playing on his games console all the time and not paying attention to his wife and children, and it was causing damage. He realized that. But listen, he couldn't just get rid of his Xbox and do nothing else. That wasn't going to change things. He was just going to be miserable with no Xbox and not a good marriage either. He needed to do something else beyond that. So there we are, I got my free Xbox, which was good. But listen, we need to do more than just a decisive action. There needs to be something else that actually is a greater pull on our attention. We need to see the beauty that is actually on offer to us, the feast that's on offer to us, the reward that is on offer to us. I don't know if there's anyone here who is into Greek mythology. I imagine probably not. But there's a story that some of you may be familiar with of these creatures called sirens. And they were kind of like mermaids, but they were kind of like half human, half bird. And they were beautiful creatures in these myths. And there was a story of these sirens, and they sang enchanting songs. They appeared very beautiful on the rocks in the ocean, and they sang beautiful songs that kind of drew sailors towards their rock that they were sitting on. It kind of enticed these sailors in and caused them to have shipwrecks and to die. And in one story, there's a guy called Odysseus who knows that he's got to travel in waters where there are these sirens, okay? He knows, I've got to go on this journey, I'm not going to be able to avoid these sirens. They're going to come and try and lure us into the rocks. And so he had his crew tie him to the mast of his ship and fill his ears with wax so that he couldn't hear their song. So he's tied to the mast of the ship. His ears are filled with this wax so that he can't hear the alluring songs of the sirens. And so his crew sail past the rocks where these sirens are, and he can see these sirens, he so desperately wants to go and be with these beautiful creatures that are drawing him in. And in his kind of trying to get away from it, he ends up hurting himself, he ends up cutting his arms, and these ties around him end up damaging him, and yet they somehow get through the waters. And nodding and scowling at his ear-plugged men who they've also got these kind of their ears closed up, he urges them to free him. The men don't hear him, and they just row harder and harder with their oars. You know, to the crew, they're kind of, the sirens just seem like kind of hungry monsters. You know, they don't kind of see what Odysseus is seeing, but they're not drawn in that way. But he is kind of fighting it all, and eventually the song fades away. And they untie Odysseus, who's now come to his senses. This is kind of what happens, friends, when we take radical steps, when we think, I feel convicted about some of the things that I've heard this morning. And we take a radical step, but we don't actually come to see the more beautiful song that is on offer, okay? Because there is another guy in this story called Jason who sets on a similar journey. And in this journey, instead of plugging up the ears of his crew, he actually instructs them to play a more beautiful song. And they play this beautiful harp music throughout the journey. It's so beautiful that the sailors and Jason, their captain, they just ignore the songs of the sirens. They're not drawn to the rocks by these sirens who are luring them in. And that is the way of faith. Do you understand there's a difference, right? There's kind of like just dealing with things practically and thinking, yeah, I probably ought to put some restrictions on in my life because I know these things are causing me to do things I don't want to be or shouldn't be doing. But then there's actually a way of faith which is coming to hear and fill our minds with the more beautiful song, the greater reward that's on offer to us. Do you understand? That's the way of faith. We need to fill our minds. There's a greater reality to fill our minds with, and that is who Jesus is and all that he has done. And that gets squeezed out a lot, doesn't it? We can come to church like we are here and have great times of worship, and we can fill our minds. We come back to our senses, don't we? Yeah, all the things that have distracted me this week. No, it's actually all about Jesus and what he's done, and I want to live for him. And then the day goes on, or Monday comes around, and it can all get squeezed out. And our attention can be drawn away from Jesus and onto to other things. And some of the young people here, you'll get to New Day in a few weeks' time and have a brilliant week. I know you will. Fixing your eyes on Jesus. But there will come days afterwards where it'll be like there's a real effort to draw your attention away from him and onto other things. That will happen because we're in a battle. And we can sometimes find ourselves kind of a bit numb towards Jesus. We can find ourselves a bit kind of unenthusiastic about church even, maybe bored, unmoved by the truth of what Jesus has done. And I think that's because our attention is taken off him. It's been given over to something else for every waking hour of the week. Your attention is seemingly fought for, constantly battled for. None of us are immune to that. The strongest Christian in the room here, I don't know who you would look to and think, yeah, I want to be like them when I'm older. There's a few people in the room here that I look at and think, I want to be like them when I'm older. But they still face this battle. They still face this battle for their attention and for their gaze. This battle to trade attention for Jesus for attention for entertainment. It happens a lot. It's the worst trade in the universe. It's the most, you lose out. You lose out. It's the worst trade you could make. What's the answer? Well, it's to keep setting our hearts and minds on the things of God. It's to keep coming back to the reality. I want to read to us from Colossians 3. Maybe you want to turn there in your Bibles. In Colossians 3, we read these verses. Let's go from verse 1. Colossians chapter 3. Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. This is the greater reality to which we're encouraged to set our hearts and minds. All these other things are like, all these other things that might distract us are like a curtain that kind of gets drawn across ultimate reality. There's a big curtain here that can, in one moment, hide all that's going on behind here, hide all these instruments. And it's like all the things that I've mentioned this morning are like things that try and hide the ultimate reality, which is all of these things, and we're going to go into them in more depth. And it's like we're invited every morning to pull back the curtains, and to see what's actually ultimate reality, to see some things that are really, really important. And the entertainment feast that is laid on for us is basically saying there's nothing to see here behind these curtains. Look at this instead. Look at these things instead. There's no other reward other than these things. Don't go behind the curtain. But there is a reward for us. There's a reward for those who will pull back the curtains and see the realities of the universe in our hearts and minds. And this is to be sought for diligently, friends. If you want to grow as a follower of Jesus, this has got to be something that we diligently fight for. We no longer live like we used to. We belong to reality now. We don't belong to this world as we used to. We belong to a different world now, a different kingdom. So this is some of the things that we need to get our heads around. The first reality is this. God is above all. We read this. God is above all, and Christ is at his right hand. That's the first reality we've got to come to each day. God is above all. There is a God. He is real. This is not all an accident. We're told this is an accident. It's become just unquestioned in our society and in our science classes and in TV programs, which it's just become this unquestioned thing. This is all an accident as a result of a collision of some particles hundreds of billions of years ago. And besides from the fact that this is completely unrealistic to get our heads around, that now the complexity of all that we see around us has just come about by accident. I mean, it's nonsense. But besides that, no one wants to live like that. No one actually lives as if there's no meaning to life. No one actually lives as if there's no truth and no design. They want to try, even those that say, I don't believe there's a God, want to try and live as if there's deep meaning and purpose. And there is. There is a God who is above all, and Christ who is at his right hand. And the entertainment feasts of this world are designed to take our eyes off of that reality to the point where you don't give fundamental reality much thought at all. I had my hair cut the other day, and I was just speaking to the guy who's cut my hair. He asked me what I do. I said I'm a pastor, and he's like, I just never ever thought about this. I've never ever thought about religion. I've never thought about meaning, because he's so drawn into all of the feasts of this world that it's like I don't even ever give this reality any thought. And it set him thinking. It started to you could see the cogs going off in his mind. Wow, there might actually be something more to life than this. But these words that Jesus is at the right hand of God are so important for us to take on board. We see here in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, it says this of Jesus: the Son, that's Jesus, is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. That means Jesus, you want to know what God's like, you look at Jesus. We see that early on in Colossians as well, where we see that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. And we read that through him everything was made, and for him everything was made. We see that beautiful reality. But let's continue with this Hebrews verse. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After Jesus had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. Some of you, when you finish your day's work, there's no more satisfying a feeling than sitting down on the sofa. It's like, job done. Or maybe like once the kids are in bed, you've cleaned the kitchen and you get to sit down, finally. It's like, job done. Well, this is what these verses are saying here. Jesus came with a task to provide purification for sin. He came with a mission, which was to lay down his life on the cross and to make a way for us to be forgiven, to be made right with God. And then we see, having done that, he sat down. Job done. So this is the first reality, friends, that we get to fix our eyes and our hearts on every day. We're invited to this feast. God is above all. There is a God. There is meaning. He is real. He's sovereign. He's over all. And Jesus is at his right hand. The job is done. All that is required for my being made right with God is done by Jesus. I don't have to keep trying to strive hard, trying to get into God's good books. It's been done by Jesus. Like we get to fix our eyes and minds on that truth and rejoice in that. That's a reality to get your minds fixed on. The job is done. The second reality is this: you have died to your old life. It says this: for you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. You really have died to that. If you're a Christian here, and I guess that's most people here, you have died to your old life. There was once a way in which you lived your life. There were once things that you lived for, things that you couldn't seemingly go without. You've died to that now. That's no longer you. You're a new creation. You've died to it. You've been buried with him. Colossians 2 verse 12 says, you were buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through your faith in the working of God who raised him from the dead. So these folks getting baptized in Ipswich this morning, they're celebrating the fact that they have died, that their old life has gone. And as they go down into the water, it's a picture of what has happened to them. They've died. Their old life is no longer theirs. They're now alive in Christ. It's a completely new life. And maybe some of you here, that's a step you haven't yet taken. And maybe you trust in Jesus, but you've not got baptized yet. It's a really clear command to believe and be baptized. Because it's a picture of what has happened to you and a declaration to others who would be watching on. I belong to Jesus now. I'm his. My old life is gone. I've got a new life in him. So you have died, and you can fix your eyes on that reality each day. I've passed from death to life. I was once dead in my transgressions and sins. I was once walking the way of the world like everyone else, but now I'm alive. And so therefore, when things are offered to you, you can say, I'm dead to that now. Now, all of the things I've described today, not all of the things are wrong. That's really important that you hear that. Not all of the things I've described today are necessarily sinful. And some of those things you might think, yeah, I can actually enjoy some of these things and please God in the process. But there will be some things that either are sinful or things that, just like we've heard today, kind of get in the way. They get in the way, like these boxes, these barrels. They get in the way. Things that hinder. We see the writer to the Hebrews says, actually throw off the sin that so easily entangles, fixing your eyes on Jesus, run the race before you, throwing off the things the sin that so easily entangles and the way that hinders you. There's difference between sinful things that tangle you up and things that just weigh you down. And you can say, I'm dead to that. I don't have to go there anymore. I formerly had no choice, but now I don't have to go there. You're dead to it. You've died to your old life. Died to the world's ways of seeking after satisfaction in worldly things, and you can just reckon it to be true. So the first thing, we've got 4 things. The first thing is this: God is above all, Christ is at his right hand. Secondly, you've died to your old life. It's no longer, you're a new creation in Jesus. Thirdly, Christ will appear again. We see this here. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. There's the greatest spectacle still to come. We're offered these spectacles all the time. Have you seen this news item? Have you seen what happened? Have you seen this goal? Have you seen this new single? Have you seen this podcast? Have you heard it yet? And there's great spectacles offered to us. The cross is the greatest spectacle that has been known to date that we're to fix our eyes on. But there's a greater spectacle still to come. The cross was one mighty spectacle, but there's a greater one to come when Jesus returns. And Revelation 1 verse 7 says, look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. And Jesus will come, and some say, well, when's he going to get on with it? It's been 2,000 years. And the early Christians had it in their hearts. He was going to come in their lifetime. When's he going to get on with it? Well, he's not slow in returning, because for him 1,000 years is like a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. So he'll come when it's the right time to come, and there will be a great feast, a great wedding feast, as he's joined with his church for all eternity. All those who've placed their faith in him will be joined with him, will have their gaze fixed upon him. And he wants to have a people who long for his appearing, who don't just kind of think, there's some other things I'd like to get done before you come back, Jesus, can you hold off? But whose hope really is in his appearing. That's the biggest thing that you want for the world and for your life, is for Jesus to come back. And I know from my heart and my life that I can think, yeah, but I really would like to see that happen as well. I'd like to see England win a major trophy. But he wants a people who long for his appearing, who really long for it. Jesus, come back. Come back. We want you to come back. The feasts of this world, although not all sinful and bad, they will sometimes dampen our appetite for him to come back. Do you see that in your heart? Yeah, actually, they're just dampening my appetite. I don't really long for him to return because these other things are kind of in your heart. He will return. Keep your lamps burning, friends. Jesus told a parable, didn't he, about the servants whose master went off to a wedding banquet and he comes back. He wants to see those that are keeping their lamps burning, staying awake, watching, waiting, praying, longing for him to return, not falling asleep, not getting lulled to sleep by the stories of the world, but saying, Jesus, I want you to come back. And then number 4, when he returns, we will appear with him in glory. In glory. What a sentence. Paul kind of says it quite nonchalantly, really. We're going to appear with him in glory. That's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing to consider. You will appear with him in glory. Because if you know him, you are united to him. You're united to Jesus. And so that means where he is, so you will be. You will be with him. That's a certain thing. He considers himself incomplete now without you. It's going to draw you to be where he is because you're united to him. We've been united to Jesus in faith. We're going to be with him in glory. He's not going to come back and create the heavens and the earth now without us. He's going to do it with us. He's going to bring us into his new creation. And none of us are worthy of that. You're not worthy of that. You've not done anything to deserve that. I have not done anything to deserve that. But what Paul is saying here is that we're not to think of ourselves as we used to be. We're now to think of ourselves as those who are going to be in glory with Jesus one day. Who are going to be with him in the new creation, the new heaven, the new earth. We're going to live on a physical earth with physical bodies. And there's going to be things for us to do, work for us to do that won't be kind of labor. Like there will be labor, but it won't be like Sunday evening feelings of like, oh, I've got to go to work in the morning. It's going to be good because there was work before sin entered the world. There's going to be friendships for us to enjoy. There's going to be exploration for us to enjoy. There's going to be food and drink think on these things. We're going to be with him. You've got to think about yourself biblically. So this life is not the sum total of my existence. I'd have to try and squeeze every ounce of entertainment out of this life, or every experience I can possibly get. I'm going to be with him forever. Paul says elsewhere that those who have died are at home with the Lord. We're so easily swayed to see this as our home. We're so easily swayed to see this is all that there is. And many of us feel at home here, right here, with all the feasts of entertainment around us, the riches, home in my skin, home in my work, home in my education, my house, my family. But listen, in one instant with Jesus, in the new creation, you will realize that you've been in a very strange place all your life. In one moment with him, as you see him face to face, you'll realize, I've never been at home until now. Just one moment. Just one moment. And you'll think, wow, this is what I was made for. You were made for him. You were made to know him. Made to enjoy him. You'll realize I've been in a foreign land all my life. This is not your life. It's hidden with Christ in God. You'll one day appear with him in glory. You shall be like him. You shall be like him. I don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. He's glorious, and we're going to have some recognition of each other. I'm pretty sure of that. I think we will still know people, but compared to seeing Jesus, I think he's going to be the big deal. He's going to be the headline act. A glory, a feast that will make the feast of this life pale into insignificance. We've got to hold on to these things. Maybe you've never ever given any thought to any of these things. Maybe like my barber the other day, maybe you're just like, I've never ever thought about these things. Maybe you've just been thinking, I'm just going through life, just kind of doing what everyone else does. There is a God. He is real. He knows you, and his Son has made the way for you to come into relationship with him. Jesus will return. He will return. And if you trust in him, you will go and be with him in glory. You will. You will know him for eternity. You will know a new creation where you have to believe me. Everything that is good in this life will pale into insignificance in comparison to being with him. The great C.S. Lewis says, we are half-hearted creatures. You probably heard this before. We're half-hearted creatures fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Friends, I want to encourage you and urge you, don't be far too easily pleased. There is a joy, a reward offered to you to continually fix your eyes on God. There's a reward behind the closed door, friends, and it's on offer to you.